The streetlights reflected off the rain-soaked pavement as Alina Carter clutched her camera bag tightly, her steps hesitant but determined. At 29 years old, Alina had faced her fair share of challenges as a freelance photographer, but nothing compared to the battle ahead. Her mother, Martha, her anchor and inspiration, had been diagnosed with an aggressive illness. The treatment costs loomed impossibly high, leaving Alina drowning in fear and frustration. She had tried everything, taking extra gigs, selling her prized equipment, even dipping into her modest savings. But it wasn't enough. Watching her once vibrant mother weaken daily felt like a knife twisting in her heart. Alina's love for Martha was boundless, but love alone couldn't pay for the life-saving treatments. As her options dwindled, a name surfaced repeatedly: Chris Maxwell, the enigmatic CEO of Maxwell Ventures. Known for his ruthless business acumen and generous philanthropy, Chris often made headlines for supporting causes, albeit on his terms. He was attending a charity gala tonight, and Alina had made up her mind. She entered the grand ballroom, feeling out of place amidst the glittering chandeliers and elegantly dressed guests. There he was, standing near the auction table. A tall figure in a perfectly tailored suit, exuding authority and an air of detachment. Mustering every ounce of courage, Alina approached him. "Mr. Maxwell, I need your help," she said, her voice trembling. Chris turned, his sharp eyes assessing her immediately. "I don't usually handle requests directly," he replied. Alina explained her mother's dire situation, presenting the medical documents she had brought along. Her voice cracked as she described the urgency of the treatment. Chris listened in silence, his expression unreadable. "I can help," he finally said, "but I have one condition." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud. "You'll spend one night with me. No strings, no expectations. Just one night." Alina's heart sank. She stared at him, her mind racing. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to walk away, but her mother's face, frail and hopeful, flashed before her eyes. "I'll do it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. As she left the ballroom, her chest felt heavy with guilt and determination. For her mother, she would endure anything. The sterile scent of antiseptics filled the hospital corridor as Alina Carter sat in the waiting room, her hands clasped tightly. Just days ago, she had made a choice she'd thought she'd never face, and now, the weight of that decision bore down on her. "Miss Carter?" the nurse called, breaking her thoughts. She hurried to meet the doctor, who smiled warmly. "The funds have cleared, and your mother's treatment will begin immediately. Timing is critical, but I'm optimistic." Relief flooded Alina's body, her knees nearly giving way. "Thank you," she whispered, but deep down, she knew who had made this possible: Chris Maxwell. That night, Alina stared at her reflection in the mirror of her modest apartment. Her face looked the same, but she felt irrevocably changed. She replayed her conversation with Chris in her mind, his calm demeanor and the chilling simplicity of his condition. "It's done," she whispered to herself, clutching her camera, her one lifeline to normalcy. She resolved to leave that chapter behind, a necessary evil she would lock away in her heart. Days turned into weeks, and Alina buried herself in work and caring for her mother, who was responding well to treatment. She avoided all thoughts of Chris, refusing to let his name linger in her mind. For her, that night was a transaction, nothing more. 9 months later, the wail of a newborn pierced the air, a sound both fragile and powerful. Ali Carter entered the world with a shock of dark hair and a pair of piercing eyes that mirrored Chris's. Alina cradled her son, her heart swelling with an emotion she hadn't expected: hope. Ali's tiny fingers curled around hers, and in that moment, she vowed to protect him from anything that could taint his innocence. As Ali grew, it became clear that he was extraordinary. By the age of 9, his love for art blossomed. His small room was a haven of color, filled with paints, sketches, and his favorite subject, phoenixes. "Mama, look!" Hallie exclaimed one morning, holding up a vibrant painting. The phoenix soared through golden light, its wings outstretched. "It's a protector, just like you protect me and Grandma." Elena's throat tightened as she kissed the top of his head. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." Despite their modest life, Ali never felt deprived. Elena worked tirelessly, balancing freelance photography gigs and late nights editing. Her mother, now in remission, became Ali's greatest cheerleader, always encouraging his creativity. But every now and then, Elena saw traces of Chris in Ali. The sharp angle of his smile, the quiet determination in his gaze. She brushed those thoughts aside. Ali was hers, and hers alone. She had built a life for them, a safe, private life, far from Chris Maxwell's shadow. One evening, Elena was helping Ali organize his paintings for a school art exhibition. "Do you think people will like them, Mama?" Ali asked, his voice tinged with nervousness. "They'll love them," she assured him. "Your art is special, just like you." As she tucked him into bed later that night, her thoughts wandered. What if Chris ever found out about Ali? Would he try to take him away? She shook her head. She couldn't let fear dictate her life. For now, their world was whole. Elena leaned down, brushing a strand of hair from Ali's face. "Good night, my little phoenix," she whispered. Outside, the moon cast a soft glow over their quiet home. But in the distance, the wheels of fate were already beginning to turn. The vibrant hue of the school art exhibition filled the hall, with proud parents and teachers milling about, admiring the works of the young artists. Chris Maxwell, dressed impeccably as always, walked through the gallery with an air of polite interest. He had been invited as a guest speaker to promote arts education, a cause his foundation supported. As Chris turned a corner, his gaze landed on a painting that stopped him in his tracks. It was a stunning phoenix soaring through a backdrop of light and fire. The details were meticulous, yet there was an undeniable sense of emotion in the strokes. "This is incredible," he murmured, stepping closer to read the placard. "Phoenix Rising, artist, Ali Carter, age 9. His heart skipped a beat. The surname meant little, but the artwork's depth struck a chord. And then, as if fate itself intervened, Chris saw the young artist standing nearby, proudly showing another painting to an elderly woman. The boy had dark, expressive eyes and a crooked smile, features so familiar that Chris felt the air leave his lungs. The resemblance was unmistakable. Chris approached cautiously, his mind spinning. "Are you the artist of these phoenix paintings?" he asked, his voice calm despite the storm brewing inside him. Ali beamed. "Yes, sir. Do you like them?" "They're remarkable," Chris replied, his gaze lingering on the boy's face. "You have quite the talent." Elena, who had been standing at a distance, froze when she saw Chris. Her hands clenched instinctively. She had hoped, prayed, that their worlds would never intersect again. But there he was, talking to Ali. Her worst fear materialized. "Ali," she called, rushing over. "Why don't you go check on your next piece with Grandma?" Ali nodded obediently, but as he left, Chris turned to face Elena. His expression shifted from curiosity to steely determination. "We need to talk," he said. They found a quiet corner outside the exhibition, away from prying eyes. "Ali," Chris began, his tone sharp. "Is he mine?" Elena met his gaze, her heart pounding. "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The single word hit Chris like a blow. He took a step back, running a hand through his hair. "Why did you tell me?" "I didn't want him dragged into your world," Elena shot back. "I didn't want him to be a headline, a scandal." Chris's eyes narrowed. "So, you thought it was better to keep me in the dark? To deny me the chance to know my own son?" "You don't understand," Elena said, her voice trembling. "I've spent years protecting him. He's happy, safe. He doesn't need the complications that come with being Chris Maxwell's son." Chris's jaw tightened. "You had no right to make that decision for me, or for him. I have a right to be in his life." Elena's mind raced. She had always known this day might come, but nothing could have prepared her for the raw emotions coursing through her. "Ali doesn't know about you," she said firmly. "He's grown up in a world where he doesn't have to deal with whispers or judgment." "And what happens when he finds out the truth?" Chris countered. "That his father wanted to be part of his life, but his mother kept him away?" The words stung, but Elena held her ground. "I did what I thought was best for him. Can you honestly say your life is a place where a 9-year-old belongs?" Chris hesitated. His world was one of high-stakes business deals, public scrutiny, and relentless pressure. But he couldn't ignore the pull he felt toward the boy he now knew was his. "I'm not walking away," Chris said finally, his voice steady. "Ali deserves to know his father, and I deserve to know my son. If you won't let me in, I'll find another way." Elena's stomach dropped. She knew exactly what he meant, a legal battle. That night, Elena sat by Ali's bedside, watching him sleep peacefully. His phoenix painting rested against the wall, its colors glowing softly in the moonlight. "I'll protect you," she whispered, "no matter what it takes." But even as she said the words, she knew the battle ahead wouldn't be easy. Chris Maxwell wasn't a man who backed down. And for the first time in years, her carefully constructed world felt like it was about to crumble. The cold sterility of the courtroom mirrored the tension between Elena Carter and Chris Maxwell, seated on opposite sides of a legal battle that neither truly wanted. Chris's legal team argued his right as Ali's father, claiming he had been unjustly excluded from the boy's life. Mr. Maxwell has both the means and the willingness to provide for Ali in ways that ensure his growth and success, his lawyer asserted confidently. Elena's team countered with equal conviction. Ms. Carter has created a stable, loving environment, free from the public pressures of Mr. Maxwell's high-profile life. Any disruption to that stability could harm Ali's well-being. Though they fought for what they believed was best for Ali, the real cost of their battle began to emerge at home. Ali, a sensitive and observant boy, felt the weight of the conflict. Once, as he worked on a phoenix painting with his mother, he asked, "Why does Mr. Maxwell keep visiting? Tommy at school says he's rich and important. Does he like my paintings because he feels sorry for us?" Elena's heart broke as she knelt to meet her son's gaze. "No, sweetheart," she said softly. "He doesn't feel sorry for us. He wants to be part of your life." Ali frowned. "Why now? Why not before?" Elena had no answer. The strain began to show in Ali's artwork. His once vivid phoenixes, symbols of light and protection, grew darker, their wings weighed down by shadows. Even his teacher expressed concern, telling Elena's work is still remarkable, but there's a sadness in it now. Is everything okay? The breaking point came during a court-mandated family therapy session. Ali was asked to draw his greatest wish. He presented a simple image, 3 figures holding hands beneath a bright sky. "That's me," he explained, pointing to the smallest figure. "And that's Mom and Mr. Maxwell. I just want us to stop fighting." His voice cracked as he added, "I don't like how my phoenixes look now. They're supposed to protect people, but they're broken." Elena and Chris stared at the drawing, the truth hitting them like a tidal wave. Their conflict, their inability to find common ground, was hurting Ali, the one they both loved most. That night, Chris made a decision. Back in his sleek office, he faced mounting pressure from his family and the Maxwell Board of Directors. His father's words echoed in his mind. "The board is uneasy about this personal matter. Do you really want to jeopardize everything for this?" Chris picked up a pen and drafted his resignation letter. The Maxwell fortune, the legacy he had been groomed to protect, no longer mattered compared to the well-being of his son. When he told Elena, she was stunned. "You gave it all up?" she asked, her voice trembling. "For Ali," Chris replied simply, "and for you." Chris Maxwell wasn't a man accustomed to waiting or earning trust the hard way, but winning over Ali Carter, his 9-year-old son, demanded patience and vulnerability, qualities he had rarely needed in his life as a high-powered CEO. Their early interactions were hesitant, filled with unspoken questions and guarded responses. Allie, curious yet cautious, often studied Chris as if trying to solve a puzzle. One afternoon, as Allie worked on a phoenix painting in his home studio, he glanced at Chris and asked, "Why do you want to spend time with me now?" The question hit Chris harder than he expected. Kneeling beside Allie, he answered softly, "Because I didn't know you existed before. If I had, I would have been here from the start. I missed so many moments, and I don't want to miss any more." Allie's hand hovered over his canvas, his voice hesitant. "Mom says you're really busy. Are you going to stop coming when work gets too much?" "No," Chris said firmly, looking directly into his son's eyes. "You're more important than work. I promise, I'm here to stay." The promise was the first crack in Allie's wall. Over time, Chris built their bond through small, consistent efforts. He joined Allie for painting sessions, played soccer in the park, and helped him with school projects. Their shared love of art became a bridge. One day, as Allie carefully blended colors for a new piece, Chris asked, "What are you painting this time?" "It's a phoenix family," Allie said thoughtfully, "but this one's different. See how their wings overlap? That means they're protecting each other." Chris felt his throat tighten. "That's beautiful, Allie. You're really talented." Allie's smile, small but genuine, was a turning point. As Chris grew closer to Allie, his connection with Elena Carter also deepened. What began as tense co-parenting slowly evolved into something more. Chris admired Elena's resilience and devotion to Allie, but it was her warmth and quiet strength that drew him in. One evening, after Allie had gone to bed, Chris lingered in the kitchen, watching Elena tidy up. "You've done an incredible job raising him," he said, his voice sincere. Elena paused, glancing at him. "I didn't have much of a choice. He's my whole world." "I see that," Chris said, stepping closer. "It's why he's such an amazing kid. You've given him so much love." Her defenses, carefully built since their reunion, began to waver. She saw a different side of Chris, the man behind the polished exterior. He wasn't just trying to earn Allie's trust. He was trying to rebuild what they had lost. The moments they shared grew increasingly personal. Late at night, after Allie was asleep, their conversations moved from logistics and parenting to memories and dreams. Chris shared stories of his strict upbringing and the pressure to live up to his family's expectations. "I've spent so much time chasing success," Chris admitted one evening, his voice soft. "But with Allie, and with you, I feel like I'm finally building something real." Elena hesitated, her heart wrestling with old wounds and new feelings. "You've changed, Chris. When we first met, you were different." "I was," he said, meeting her gaze. "But meeting Allie, seeing you again, it's made me want to be better. For both of you." Even Allie noticed the change. One evening, as Chris tucked him into bed, the boy asked with a grin, "Do you like Mom?" Chris chuckled, caught off guard. "Why do you ask that?" "Because you look at her the way I look at my paintings when I finish them," Allie said simply. "Like she's the best thing you've ever seen." Chris smiled, brushing his son's hair back. "Your mom's pretty amazing, isn't she?" "Yeah," Allie said with a yawn. "You should tell her." That fall, their bond as a family solidified. On crisp evenings, they took walks together, Allie skipping ahead while Chris and Elena walked side by side. One night, as Allie admired the changing leaves, Elena slipped her hand into Chris's. Startled, Chris glanced at her, a mixture of surprise and gratitude in his eyes. "Elena, don't ruin it," she teased, a soft smile on her lips. As they continued walking, the weight of their complicated past began to fade, replaced by a growing hope for the future. For the first time, they felt like a real family, not perfect, but genuine, bound by love, trust, and the shared journey that had brought them back together. They were rising together, like the phoenixes Allie painted so beautifully. The gallery was alive with anticipation as parents, teachers, and art enthusiasts filled the space for the grand exhibition. At just 10 years old, Ali Carter was the youngest artist to showcase his work, a collection of Phoenix paintings that told a deeply personal story of resilience, love, and family. Chris Maxwell and Elena Carter stood side by side, watching Ali nervously adjust his tie as he prepared to speak. His centerpiece, titled "Rising Together," hung prominently in the middle of the gallery. The painting depicted three phoenixes flying through a turbulent storm, their wings overlapping in a protective arc. The colors shimmered with light and shadow, symbolizing the journey Ali, Elena, and Chris had traveled together. "It's incredible," Chris whispered, his voice filled with awe. Elena smiled, her eyes glistening with emotion. "He's poured his whole heart into it. It's about us." As the room quieted, Ali stepped up to the microphone, his small hands gripping the edges of the podium. He scanned the crowd nervously before his gaze settled on his parents. They nodded encouragingly, and Ali took a deep breath. "This collection is about my family," he began, his voice clear but tinged with emotion. "When I first started painting phoenixes, I thought they were just protectors, strong and alone. But now, I know that real strength comes from being together, even when things are hard. This painting, Rising Together, is about my mom, my dad, and me. We're like the phoenixes in the storm, protecting each other, helping each other, and rising together." The room erupted into applause, and Ali's face lit up with pride as he looked at Chris and Elena. After the applause subsided, Chris and Elena joined Ali by his painting. The three stood together, their reflections visible in the glass frame. "You were amazing up there," Chris said, ruffling Ali's hair. "Thanks, Dad," Ali replied, beaming. Elena leaned down and kissed Ali's forehead. "We're so proud of you." As the gallery buzzed around them, a photographer approached, asking to take a picture of the family. Chris glanced at Elena, silently asking for her approval. She smiled and nodded, and the three of them posed together, a true family, united by love and resilience. That evening, back at home, the three of them sat in Ali's studio. The boy, still buzzing with excitement from the exhibition, worked on a new painting while Chris and Elena watched. "What's this one about?" Chris asked. Ali grinned without looking up. "It's a phoenix teaching its baby to fly." Chris and Elena exchanged a glance, their hands brushing lightly. "It sounds perfect," Elena said softly. In the quiet warmth of the studio, surrounded by Ali's vibrant artwork, they felt the weight of their journey lift. They had endured loss, conflict, and sacrifice, but together, they had built something stronger. A family grounded in love and trust. The future was no longer uncertain. It was theirs to paint, one brushstroke at a time, rising together like the phoenixes Ali had always imagined. The golden hues of a setting sun bathed the porch in warm light as Chris Maxwell and Elena Carter sat side by side, the soft hum of the city in the distance. Their house was quiet, with Ali tucked into his room, likely sketching another phoenix or dreaming up his next masterpiece. Chris glanced at Elena, the woman who had transformed his life in ways he never thought possible. "We've come so far," he said, his voice tinged with emotion. "When I think about everything we've been through, the choices, the sacrifices, it's hard to believe we're here." Elena smiled, her gaze fixed on the stars above. "It wasn't easy, but looking at Ali, at everything he's created, I know it was worth it." Chris nodded, his hand slipping into his pocket where a small velvet box rested. His heart raced as he looked at Elena, the woman who had not only raised their son with grace and strength, but had also taught him the true meaning of love and family. "Elena," he began, his voice unusually hesitant. She turned to him, her curious expression softening as she saw the vulnerability in his eyes. "What's wrong?" Taking a deep breath, Chris stood and knelt before her. Elena's eyes widened as he pulled out the velvet box. opening it to reveal a delicate gold ring, engraved with a phoenix motif. "I've spent most of my life chasing things that didn't matter," Chris said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Success, approval, fortune, they all felt so important, but none of it gave me what I've found with you and Allie. You're my home, Alina. You've given me a second chance, and I don't want to waste another moment." His eyes locked onto hers. "Will you marry me?" Alina's breath caught in her throat as her mind raced through every moment they had shared, the hardships, the doubts, the love that had slowly grown between them. Tears brimmed in her eyes, and her lips curved into a radiant smile. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Of course I'll marry you." Relief and joy washed over Chris as he slid the ring onto her finger, his hands shaking slightly. Rising to his feet, he pulled her into a tight embrace, their foreheads touching as they laughed through their tears. From the doorway, a small voice interrupted. "Does this mean I get to be the ring bearer?" Chris and Elena turned to see Allie grinning, his dark eyes sparkling with excitement. "Absolutely," Chris said, scooping his son into his arms. "But you're in charge of making it the best wedding ever." Allie giggled. "Deal. Can we put phoenixes everywhere?" "As many as you want," Elena said, ruffling Allie's hair. Months later, their small studio transformed into a magical venue. Strings of fairy lights illuminated the space, while Ali's phoenix paintings adorned every wall, symbolizing the journey of love, resilience, and family. As Elena walked down the makeshift aisle, her mother by her side, Chris stood waiting, his heart swelling with pride and gratitude. Ali, dressed in his best suit, carried the rings with utmost care, beaming as he reached his parents. When Chris spoke his vows, his voice trembled. "Alina, you've taught me how to love, how to trust, and how to be the father Ali deserves. I promise to stand by you and our family, to protect and cherish this life we've built. Always." Tears glistened in Elena's eyes as she replied, "Chris, you've shown me what second chances look like. You've given Ali a father and me a partner I never thought I'd find. I promise to love you, to grow with you, and to keep our family strong forever." That evening, after the celebration ended, the three of them stood in Ali's studio, admiring one of his newest paintings. It depicted three phoenixes perched together on a branch, their wings wrapped around one another protectively. Above them, the sky shimmered with stars, each one a promise of the future. "What's this one called?" Chris asked, his arm around Elena's waist. Ali grinned. "Home. It's about us." Chris and Elena exchanged a glance, their hearts full. "You know," Ali said, his head resting on Chris's shoulder, "phoenixes never stop flying. Even when they get tired, they keep going because they know there's something beautiful waiting for them." Elena kissed the top of Ali's head. "That's right, and together, we can handle anything." Chris tightened his hold on his family, his voice steady. "We're just getting started, together." And as they stood there, surrounded by love and the promise of new beginnings, they knew their journey was far from over. But whatever came next, they would face it together, like phoenixes rising through the storm, their hearts forever bound